Hello everyone. Last time we tried to comprehend the basics of oligopoly. We marked the features of oligopoly as there being a few sellers and that the market power would be with a few sellers. There could be concentration of a few in the total measure of the industry output. There would be natural and strategic entry barriers which would prohibit or dissuade the others from entering this market. Why is it so? The first thing we would like to look at is what is the minimum efficient scale required to keep the strategic entry barrier high. There would be firms, big firms, which would have brands which are well entrenched, and to operate there has to be a minimum efficient scale. The economies of scale matter. It could be the minimum scale of operation or the size of a factory that is needed in order to operate at an optimal or lower cost. If the firm chooses to have a lower level of operation, then the costs of operations will be high. As you can see here in the diagram, the average cost at price 20 is quite high, whereas if the price is 10 and the average cost is at the quantity is quite high of demand, the average cost being low ensures that the long run average cost throws forth a quantity of a minimum efficient scale, and that acts as a natural entry barrier to competitors. Brands are also well entrenched. Capital investments may be high. All these make an oligopolistic market. There could be collusion or cartelization. As in the case of oil industry or oil manufacturing countries, which went into form a cartel in 1970 with the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. There are few countries and a few firms that work as monopoly producers of oil in those countries like Saudi Aramco or Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, Qatar Petroleum. And so these countries got together to form the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. There is an identical product, that's oil. And then they brought about a stability of demand and costs. So through collusion and through cartelization, oligopolists can fix prices or output or both. Now that results in a kinged demand curve. We said we would explain elaborately on a kinged demand curve. In oligopoly, if the competitor raises his price, then the other rival firms do not need to match it because they would stand to gain as customers would migrate to them. Consumers would switch over to them. But in the case there is a price reduction by one firm, then all the rival firms will have to match if they are not to lose market share. This explains the kinged demand curve. This explains the price rigidity nature of oligopoly firms' demand curve. The demand curve is a two-part demand curve. There are two different elasticities. One for upward price moves and the other for price moves down. So when there are price moves down, customer base will expand. But in upward price movements, customer base will shrink. And that really brings about a kinked demand curve. Average revenue or demand curve has a kink at the point of operation of the firm. That is exhibited in this diagram, where you can see that if there is an upward movement, demand will go against the firm that raises the costs, raises the prices. If the competitors do not follow any price rise, they would not, because they stand to benefit in a given situation. And that is why you have a kinked demand curve. So that brings about a certain stability in the price, maybe at around 10 and 1000 quantity. In this example, you would find that people are matching only price reductions, but not, I wouldn't say never, but not price rises. Now that is a kinked demand curve for you. Now there are certain problems. This kinked demand curve shows that there is strategic interdependence among the few sellers that are there. So if you are raising prices, customer base will shrink. So you have to depend on the other. Potential or expected responses by your competitors become important. This model therefore positively predicts a stability in pricing. But we should remember the demand curve does not explain how stable prices are arrived at. It merely explains that price stability occurs. There must be a prior process that determines the price. That is not necessarily explained here. So strategic interdependence is not completely explained by this kinked demand curve. Nevertheless, it stands as the biggest hallmark of oligopoly. Now we advance to what is called a game theory. Basic question is, will strategic interaction between the competitor firms lead to a competition or a cooperation between rivals, given that there is a possibility of a price reduction or there is a possibility of output increase? Will strategic moves by one force the rival to compete with the rival or cooperate among themselves, between themselves? Different players anticipate different responses monetarily, different payoffs. So there are different strategic options, and with these strategic options, your reward system could be quite different. And that is what is a game theory all about. Each combination has different outcomes. In a game theory, there are different strategic options, and these strategic options have different outcomes, monetary outcomes or payoffs or market share outcomes for the two firms that are competing. This is basically drawn out of the prisoner's dilemma, which all of us have heard of. So if two criminals are called for questioning separately by the authorities, there could be a possibility that each prisoner is offered a deal. If they provide good evidence that would go against their fellow conspirator or fellow criminal, then the approver could be going free or could escape. So there could be a dilemma when two criminals in a joint offense, one named Shiv and the other named Dreamer. So if Shiv and Dreamer are caught by the police, there are various options before these two. If Dream is silent, if Shiv is silent, if Dream cheats, and if Shiv cheats, so what happens? If Dreamer is silent and Shiv is silent, it is possible that both of them don't reveal any secrets of how they went about doing that crime. Then there could be short sentencing because there is no evidence. However, if Shiv tells the full story about how they did it and how Dream is responsible, then Dream could get a longer term, could be sentenced to long in jail, and Shiv could go free. So if he is cheating the partner, then he could go free and she would get a longer sentence. Whereas if the Dreamer cheats, then it is possible, and if Shiv is silent, the Dreamer can go free, but Shiv can go long term. And if both of them cheat each other, both would get medium sentences. If both reveal what would happen, what had happened. And so they could decide whether they should reveal the crime methodology or whether they should cooperate. And that brings us to what is called the prisoner's dilemma application of game theory between firm A and firm B. You could cooperate and get 50% of the market share, 50% of the market. Or you could go on a price war and then you could get 20-60 or 60-20, whichever way you look at it. Or with both could come down, bring the prices down, and then they would get a 50-30-30 reward. So you are looking at benefits. If there is a price war, if there was no price war, then possibly they would both be earning 50 million each. But if there is a price war, then it is possible that both could lose out if they fight with each other. If firm A decides to start the price war and firm B is quiet, then possibly they may get 60 and the other may get only 20. Or if firm B starts the price war, they could get 60 million and then the other firm may get only 20 million. So what we are seeing is that there could be various combinations that one could start or one could cooperate. One could start a war or one could cooperate. The earning potential is enhanced if you cooperate. The earning potential is reduced if you go on a price war. Now that brings us to what is called a Nash equilibrium. Nash equilibrium is a theory which has won the Nobel Prize. Nobel laureate John Nash, a great professor, proved that the optimal solution for any game must result in each player making an optimal decision, taking into account what the potential response of the rival could be. Each player does what he thinks is best, given what the rivals may do in response. So then there is a dominant strategy, which is the player's best response, whatever is decided by the rival. Now this is a Nash equilibrium. Now then there are various models which come out of the oligopolistic model, which says one, each firm in oligopolistic market structure tries to maximize its total profits or total revenue, assuming that the other firm will not increase its output. Under this assumption, there will be moves and counter moves by each firm until each firm sells exactly 1/3 of the amount of total production that would be sold if the market had been perfectly competitive. So Kurno says that the important point to note is that firms will not go in for a price assumption, but will go in for output constant approach, and that is why the Kurno model is noted. Then we have the Stackelberg model, which says that there is an advantage in moving first. This is similar to the Kurno model, but firms do not make strategic decisions simultaneously. The first mover has the advantage. That's what it says. It says that the first mover has the advantage. Both players don't make simultaneous decisions. So, if A is the leader and B is the follower, A now has a considerable advantage over its rival. So, A will therefore choose an output which maximizes its own output, its own profit, and is somewhere located on B's reaction function. So B only, firm A being the leader has the first mover advantage. Firm B reacts to the act of firm A. In Bertrand model, the best level of output of each firm assumes that the other person holds its price rather than its output constant. So Bertrand presumption is about price. Kurno's presumption was about output. In the case of Stackelberg, the presumption is about output, but it is about the first mover getting the advantage. In Bertrand, the level of output is assumed that the other firm will hold its price rather than its output constant. Now finally we have this price leadership model, which talks about the leader setting the price. It can be because the leader is a dominant market shareholder or has the lowest cost advantage. The cost of the company, if it is lowest for the price leader, he sets the price. Then the leader's decision is imitated or followed up by the followers, and therefore this informal practice is an imperfect pollution. These significant models and the King's demand curve and the practical nature of the industry, like in the airlines industry or in the automobile industry, oligopoly is very much all around us. Thank you.